All right, well, this is episode 23 of Talk That Talk. I'm your host, Fallon Stokes, and we got a special guest again this week. We got Corey Maggette, CM, NBA great, Duke great, Chicago great. Welcome to the show, Corey.
Thanks, Fallon. Thanks for having me on.
I'm so happy you could join. Just your background's pretty amazing. You know, you're from Melrose Park, Illinois. That's a suburb outside of Chicago.
Yeah, well, Melrose Park was actually where I was born.
Okay.
Yeah, so we grew up in Bellwood, Illinois.
Okay.
So that's about, from the inner city, it's about 15 minutes out of the city.
Got you. So, you played your high school basketball at Fenwick High School, and you were a McDonald's All-American, great amateur athlete, basketball player, played football, ran track, you were multi-talented. And then you make your transition and decide to attend Duke University, where you were a diaper dandy, a one and done, and had a great career for a freshman. Were able to go lottery, 13th pick in the NBA draft back in '99, and you were drafted by the Supersonics. I know people forget about them.
Yeah.
But they traded you to Orlando, where you spent a season, then transitioned to the Clippers and played with a few other teams during your NBA career, a 14-year vet. Post-retirement, you joined the Big Three, had a comeback playing back in 2017, 2018. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later with your journey and with the injury you sustained during that time. And to now, currently, you're a sports analyst with Fox Sports and, still working with the Clippers, very connected and very close with the team. So I just want to start out and just talking about growing up, you said in a suburb outside of Chicago and just being a highly talented and touted recruit in basketball. How was that experience growing up in Chicago?
Well, I would say it was different because my dad, before that, my dad grew up on the south side of Chicago. My mom, she grew up in Maywood, Illinois. And, after my brother was born, they decided to move from the south side back towards the suburb area of Bellwood. And, when you think about that time growing up, you're a kid, just trying to figure it out on what you want to do. And my first love was baseball, and I ran track. And so when I think about those times when I was a young kid, it was just all about staying outside, right? You stay outside until the lights come back on, and then you bring your butt back in the house. And so I would say that was the start. And I got the opportunity. I got a little tired of actually baseball at the time. And I remember going to the Boys and Girls Club, and a friend of mine, his grandfather's name was Pops. And I was just leaving one of my baseball games, and I headed to the Boys and Girls Club like, hey, Corey, would you mind hopping in? We didn't have a lot of players. All I need you to do is you see the ball up by the rim, you run and jump and get it. And you pass it to Ryan or Darius. That's what you're supposed to do. And try not to run without dribbling the basketball. And I remember, just running down the court and grabbing a rebound. Next thing you know, I'm running and traveling. They were like, man, this dude is terrible, man. This dude is terrible. and so for me, I really appreciate, Ryan's grandfather, Pops, because he said, hey, man, if you put a little work in it, you can be a little player here. So, for me, I was able to listen to those instructions and figure out exactly if I wanted to play basketball. So I was just kind of intrigued about the game. Like I see what guys are doing on the court. I see what they're doing at the Boys and Girls Club, going back to visit my cousins in the west side of Chicago and the south side of Chicago. You seem like, oh, okay, they're playing this game. And I was coming from baseball and track. And so from there, I was to the point like, man, I wanted to learn the game of basketball. So I just kind of digged in back then. I remember going to the Boys and Girls Club, and from Eisenhower, started trying to go to some little camps, some local camps around the area just to work on my skill level. And, I remember, I tell my son this entire time, it was this kid, man, back at Eisenhower. And they used to call me George. I don't know why they used to call me George, but because I was like the worst dude on the team. So they're like, all right, hey, George, give me the ball, get out of here. And so I used to think about that every day when I went home, that, I wanted to prove these guys wrong, because I'm coming from different sport. and where I was the best baseball player. I was doing like 85 miles an hour, as a sixth grader. And so now, I'm trying to make this transition from another sport, and now I'm not the best one.
Yeah.
And it really, like I said, it really intrigued me to be better. So I put in a ton of work, Fallon,
Really?
trying to be a ton of work, because I was actually determined, that those kids that were calling me George, like, hey, no, you're not going to be calling me George. I'm about to put some work in. And I didn't show up back to Eisenhower until I felt like I was ready. Like, I'm going to go I'm going to go to these camps, local camps. And I started going to all these local camps in the city, in suburbs, and, from one camp to the other. And all of a sudden I started getting invited to, all right, we want you. And I started to get better every single year until, that following summer, I came back to Eisenhower. And man, I destroyed him. I destroyed him. And that was the start. That was basically the start.
That was the start. Okay, how old were you about that age when you went back to Eisenhower?
Man, I was probably 12 or 13 at that time.
Wow.
12
Wow.
or 13,
That's
and it
great.
was, and at that time, extent, I was still playing baseball.
Uh-huh.
And, but then that shift towards the 12, 13, like I was like, all right, I'm determined for the entire summer to play basketball, to be
Okay.
committed to that.
Okay. So, okay, we're gonna fast forward. Talk about like your high school experience.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the likes if you played your teammates, but how great was your high school team? And, did y'all win state championships? Talk about your high school career a bit.
Well, first of all, I was determined if I wanted to go to a public school. At that time, it was Proviso West. That was a public school in the area that you had to go to.
Uh-huh.
But then, one of my AAU coaches at the time, his name was Carl Bridges, can say, hey, man, you have to do something different. You might have a better future and better opportunity if you think about, this school, Fenwick High School. It's a private school. And, man, we're going to figure out like how to get you in it. My parents couldn't afford to send me to their school.
Mm-hmm.
Lo and behold, we had an anonymous donor at the school who, that they would actually invest in kids, the inner city kids or people that really needed help, that they would, it was like 5 to 10 kids per year that they would pay for them to go to their school. And I was one of those kids that was able to get that.
Okay.
And it allowed me at that time to go somewhere different, where at that time, going to Fenway High School, we had a total of, 4 Black students at our school.
Mm-hmm.
And, the rest of the kids were, if it was either white, and you had some, Latinos at that time. And so it was a whole different scenario for me going from, the public system
Yeah.
into this private school.
Yeah.
But that actually, it was the best decision that I would say my parents made at the time. I remember, going to the school and like, man, Mom, this is not for me. This is
Yeah.
probably not the school for me. And she was like, hey, just wait it out and see what happens. And, lo and behold, the next day I was like, no, I don't want to stay. For some apparent reason,
Uh-huh.
I end up staying. And man, it was the best decision, I would say, that my parents and myself we made at that time, because it'll allow me to be in a position of having people around me that are diverse. That diversity was something that was different, but even from a cultural standpoint, but it allowed me to understand,
Yeah.
to push myself, and from there, you know, the basketball kicked in. And my at that school at that time, Fenwick was not the best basketball school. It was actually really known for football. So you're
Okay.
coming into a program that wasn't very good, and then you have about 6 to 8 guys that were football players, varsity football players, and they said,
Uh-huh.
hey, would you be interested in playing varsity? We could use you.
Mm-hmm.
Say, hey, supposedly touted. We just finished winning AAU nationals,
Okay.
with Larry Butler's team at that time. So by that time, now I'm getting some recognition from a standpoint like, this cat can really hoop. He's worked out.
Yeah.
He's getting better at his game. And from there, going to Fenwick, being able to play varsity, it was an amazing experience for me. So you go from, I remember my first game I had like 20 and 10. And they were like,
Uh-huh.
wow, okay. And we won a game. And this was a team that we weren't supposed to win against. And here
Uh-huh.
comes this kid that, now he has 2018 as a freshman, and it just kind of took off from there.
I got you. Yeah, no, that's one thing I would say about high school, period, with me. It's like that transition where you could get diversity and get
Mhm.
exposed to different atmospheres. I think, especially as an athlete, it's good because
Yeah.
when you go on to these D1 schools where you know you're not going to see many people of color, depending on where you go, but the diversity aspects in order to just, interact with just different groups of people, different races, I
Hmm.
think is so important and key. So, high school ends for you. You end up finishing high school as a McDonald's All American.
Hmm.
And I know it was tons of schools recruiting you. I'll let you name the list, but I know the main one the university you decided to attend was Duke. So, what made you choose Duke? Especially, during that time, they already had a winning tradition,
Hmm.
but the players they had on that roster when you were going in as a freshman, was it any issues in your head about playing time, or what just went in your head about making this decision to go to Duke?
Well, you know what? When I think about that decision, even going to Duke, and I'll tell you the backstory on that. I was in a position in my life that I just wanted to play against the best. It wasn't about like, all right, I'm not going to have any playing time. Realistically, Fallon, I never thought that I was going to play pros. That wasn't even, like I said, basketball wasn't my first love. It wasn't even my second love. It was third. And so you have me in this position where I'm actually playing these other sports, but I'm using this other aspect of it just to get better at it and wanted
Mhm.
to figure out how can I continue to climb the ladder. And it was never about like, all right, I'm trying to make it to the pros. It's just about getting better. And the decision, even from Duke, I had Georgetown, I had Stanford, I had Duke at that time, Illinois, and honestly, the schools that I thought that I probably would have went was probably Stanford would have been my first choice at the time. I
Okay.
went to Stanford, first time going to California, and and I was like, wow, this is crazy, man. This kid coming from Chicago, I'm like, man, this is so different. And I
Yeah.
had the best visit, I would say, going there. And not only that, I was able to see like these cats that, they put a lot of work in on the basketball court, but from an academic standpoint, it was just the next level,
Right.
going to Stanford and their commitment to it. And that was different. Like, all right, I've come from, Fenwick School, which was a college preparatory school that
Hmm.
they focus on that. And
Hmm.
so, as the notion is being more than just an athlete. And so when you look at their program, I'm looking at their program, we're looking at, you know, um, as far as the people that went to that school at Stanford at the time, like, wow, this could be a great thing, because it's not just about basketball at the
Right.
time. And so I remember going there, and Mark Manson was the guy who took me on my
He was
visit.
crazy in the league. I remember he was a
And
Laker.
and man, but he was uber smart, man. When I'm
Oh yeah.
talking about so smart, and most cats didn't even know that he was so smart because
Oh,
he just hung around with everybody. But when it comes to the book work, he just knew about it. So he said, "Hey Corey, listen, I'm not going to take you to the court first. I'm not going to show you like, all right, where the weight room. I'm taking you to every single one of my classes." I'm like, "All right," and you're going to sit next to me in my class. And so I'm like, all right, I'm sitting in there, and he's raising his hand up
uh-huh.
every single time in class. And yeah, I have Corey here who's visiting. We're trying to get him go here, but hey, and he's answering all the questions. So even though he was being funny, he was still educated to know, if it's the certain class that it was in and answering the correct answers. I'm like, this guy he's really on. Like he can play both sides on the fence when it comes to that. And so I really love that about Stanford.
Mhm.
And then from there, I went to Illinois, had a chance, I had to go and
Yeah.
visit Illinois. Lon Kruger was the head coach at the time. And it was cool because now I could be close to home. Illinois was a school that even my older brother at the time looked at. So
Hmm.
for me, it was something like, all right, let me just go and visit. And, maybe this could be home, close to home if I got homesick, etc. And then lastly, I remember Coach K, coming to my school at the time. And he's like, hey, I want to
That's a
talk to
big
my coach,
deal.
John Quinn. We start talking, and then Coach K came, and then John Thompson, rest his soul, he ended up coming to my school.
Uh-huh.
And man, I had just great conversations with them and talking about, their school and then their program. And then following that, the week after, Coach K came to my house. And, he sat in my living room, talked to my parents. He's from the south side of Chicago. And so for me, I'm looking at like, all right, I know that he's from the south side. My pops grew up in the south side. So they kind of have like these same mannerisms where, all right, well, if you come to Duke, you got to work, just like my dad, like, hey,
Hard work.
you got to work. It's hard work. This is not anything that's going to be easy. And he's like, hey, I'm not going to promise your son anything. Your son has to work. And I was like, wow. And my parents, like, my dad, like, oh yeah, you're right. You got to work. You got to work, boy. You got to work, son. And so like they really like Coach K. And then I was able to take that visit to Duke, and Elton Brand and William Avery at the time took me on my visit. Man, we had the best time ever. When I tell you, it felt like home because I knew Elton Brand, from the Nike All-American camp. I knew those guys. So now when we were playing in the Nike All-American, we would talk then as younger kids, and all of a sudden he's at Duke and like coming to Duke. He's taking me on my visit. And it was the best time. We drove to UNC, and next thing I know, some eggs flew out the car. Like Duke all the way, Duke all the way. And honestly,
big rivalry right there on the Tobacco Road. Yeah.
So you already know it was a huge robbery, and man, they sold me on that school. And then after that, I remember the first day of practice. It was like 6 a.m. We were out on the track. We were doing the track work. And after the track work, we inside on the court. And we on the court without a basketball. We're doing like full court drills without a basketball. I'm like, man, what is this? And then you hear like Coach K comes in there, you son of a, like he's doing all of this crazy talking. I remember like after practice, like he was like a drill sergeant. He came from West Point.
Yeah.
I called my mom, like, Mom, man, this not the dude that came to our house. This dude is really from the streets of the South Side. And so it was like a different experience of coach. But man, I tell you, what Coach K taught me, that program, basically putting your ego aside and learning how to play for the betterment of the team. If you look at all those players, every single player on the Duke program during my year, and even now, they were the number one option every single year. Every single player was, top 5 in the country. And you had to come in there, you had to fight for it. He didn't give anybody their spots. And he told them, I remember, he getting on Elton's case, like, dude, just because you're on the cover of ESPN or Sports Illustrated, you better go out here and bust your tail in the court, or you're going to sit on the bench. And I'm like, man, he's saying this to Elton Brand. This dude averaging 20 and 10. I said, shoot, man, I got to get my act together. So that approach, and even like the Shane Batties of the approach that they took, because they understood like, hey, we want to win. We have to be selfless on the basketball court, be selfless in the stands in order for us to win. And Coach K, he drove that in us, right? It was like you have these soldiers, right? And you have to break their ego. And it was to the point, man, any one of those players, will run through a wall for Coach K. And that's why, the spirit of excellence was always around that program.
I got you. So going back to Duke, you were one and done, but your freshman year, you go to the national championship game. At one point, y'all had won like 37 games straight or something. That was crazy that year.
Yeah.
So I know, being you a little bit, you like 2 years older than me, I think 2 or 3, but I remember being a kid and watching all that. And I was the biggest fan. I just loved how you played. I loved the team. Even though I wasn't a big Duke fan, I used to love UNC as a kid, but your team made me a fan. And that was one of the best national championship games I've ever seen, when y'all played against Rip Hamilton and UConn, Ricky Moore, Jake Voskuhl. That team was loaded too. So it was Reggie Freeman, a bunch of NBA prospects between Duke and UConn in that game. Unfortunately, y'all end up losing by 3. Talk about that experience. Like you say, in this whole year, you're working hard, you're buying into Coach K's concepts, you're practicing on a daily basis with the likes of Elton Brand, who's the number 1 pick coming out that year, and other Shane Battier, Trajan Langdon. Yeah. So talk about that experience of playing in a national championship game your freshman season.
Man, you know what? Honestly, man, it was almost like I take it back to even when I was in eighth grade when I really started to play. I go from like, all right, training, and then all of a sudden I win AAU nationals, and
Right.
then all of a sudden I go and play, go to high school, and then I win like, the Chicago Catholic League, but then we lose in the state championship game. And then you go to Duke, and then you have this position where we lost our first game of the year was against Cincinnati when they had Kenya Martin at the time
Hmm.
at the Great Alaskan Shootout. And then from there, we did not lose a game until the national championship game against UConn. And so it was almost like you're part of winning, right? And I look back at that game. I mean, what an unbelievable run that we had and the guys that we had. Great leadership on the part from Trajan Lane. He was the older guy on the team, but he was a leader, man. And he actually went number 10, I believe, to the Cleveland Cavaliers during that year. So we actually had four guys that was in top, I don't know, the top 15 picks
Yeah.
in the draft, I believe, at the
Same.
time. And man, to think about what we did in the national championship game and what we experienced as a team, it was amazing. Yeah, I hate that we lost into the championship game because, if you look, you could have asked anyone at the time, like, man, Duke is going to win this game. But I
Wow.
tell you, that man, Richard Hamilton, Rip, man, went to work on us for 32 points that game. I never forget that. And man, it was just, you win some and you lose some, but what a great experience.
Yeah, it was an awesome game. So after that experience, you decide to leave Duke. And I know that was during the time you didn't see too many one and dones in college.
Mhm.
And you definitely didn't see them coming out of Duke. Those players usually stayed at least 3 seasons, I would say. So, talk about that decision. Like, what was toying you and your family? You were just 19 at the time, I think, when you
Yeah.
made the decision. So you were still a kid. So what was going on in your mind when you had to make the decision? You're like, I think I'm ready to make this leap to the pros.
Well, you know what, Fallon, honestly, when I think about that time, I didn't really want to go out. Honestly, I was there to stay for all 4 years.
Mhm.
And it just so happened around right after that championship game, people start calling and saying this and that, like saying, hey, you decided to come out. And I remember talking to Tim Grover, who was Michael Jordan
Mhm.
trainer at the time. He was like, hey, Corey, man, you have to, think about, your future because right, you're here right now, you're in a position you can make it to the pros. I'm like, well, Tim, I never even thought that I was going to the pros. So all of a sudden, I'm looking for all this, I'm looking at all this information, I'm getting other people, and everyone at the time, Fallon, said that, hey, he's coming out. But that was never my decision in the beginning.
Mhm.
So I remember back, Coach K, he's tracking me down on campus, right? All the assistants, Johnny Dawkins, Steve Wojciechowski, they're literally chasing me around campus, like wanting me to do a press conference, to say that I'm coming back to school. I'm like, why am I doing a press conference when I've never even said that I was leaving school? And
Right.
so that was a whole ordeal. But then after that, when everything basically hit the fan, that now he's projected to be a lottery. One thing that I respect Coach K, even though he was mad, the entire program they were mad that you had guys leaving early, and it was probably even more mad at me because here I am, the youngster, and
Right.
Eldon and William Avery was the older statesman at that time. He called me to his house and said, "Hey, Corey, come on. You have to be a man and come face me as a man, and tell me about what you're doing." And so I remember at the time he had hip surgery. Go to his house, and we're sitting down having this conversation about what's going to happen in the draft. He brought out all this information. I'm talking about this high of information
Really.
on. Yes, it was crazy. Like, all right, this if you're projected 1 through 5. This is you projected 5 through 13. This is if you projected outside of the lottery. This is if you're projected for a second rounder. All these different things. Which, when I look back as 41 years old right now, you look back at that. I really appreciate him doing it because it was a grown up decision. It was a
Mhm.
grown up decision that I had to make, but also, to have even more validation by having Coach K sit down with me, take his time to do that, which ultimately gave me the decision to make, because it wasn't my mom's decision. It
Right.
wasn't Coach K's decision. It was Corey Maggette's decision. And
Mm-hmm.
so I had to sit back and on my own, make this decision and evaluate all the information. And ultimately I made the decision to leave.
Mm. Well, I mean, it should have worked out. You were a lottery pick, so you
Mm-hmm.
can't beat that. So now you are in the pros, and you are
Mm-hmm.
a rookie in Orlando. You get drafted by the Supersonics, but they trade the pick to Orlando. So, how was that first season in the NBA, and how did you have to adjust? Did your family come down to Orlando with you just to help you get settled, or did you just try and do it on your own? How did that work out for you?
Well, first of all, being drafted by the Seattle Supersonics and taking one step off the stage, and they handed me Orlando Magic. Like, man, you've been traded already. I'm like, what? All right, take that hat off and put this other hat on. And they said, oh, by the way, you know that Doc Rivers is the coach that grew up, where your mom used to live down in Maywood. I was like, oh, okay, I know Doc. We know their entire family. And so now I was like, oh, that's cool. It's Doc Rivers. I'm in Orlando. And, I remember the first day of training camp, man. This is probably one of my greatest stories. Mind you, at Duke, Coach K will have us do 17s all the time. And you know what 17s are.
Mm-hmm.
5 to 8 17s. This was like normal. And we're doing this every single day. This is not, all right, you do one and then
Yeah.
you don't see it again, for about 2 weeks. This was every day. And I remember Doc Rivers. So Doc Rivers is coming back from the Pat Riley system, right? The way they were taught how to play in Miami. So that's the old school, grueling conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
And Doc Rivers comes there and we have this conversation. All right, guys, everyone online, we got to do our conditioning test. We got to do 5-17s. And, at that time, Fallon, the older veteran guys, they worked themselves into shape. They didn't come
Right.
into camp in shape. And here's Doc like, no. You guys need to be in shape. And so we going through the 17s, guards got to do it in this time, forwards, centers, and I breezed through it. I mean, literally breezed through it. And I'm like, man, and I'm seeing guys, honestly, guys was falling out, throwing up. They had to one of them had to bring the paramedics in for oxygen masks for a player, because they like, man, we thought we were going to work ourselves into shape. And Doc said, no.
Right.
And so my first experience from that standpoint of like, all right, this is what I was taught at Duke. This is why we were prepared at Duke and why we were the best conditioned team, because of what we've done in the past. So I went into the standpoint of like, this is how you're supposed to work. So every single drill, every single sprint drill, I won every single drill. This is as a young kid.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that was embedded in me, from the Duke program, that you had to push yourself,
Right.
regardless of the situation. And when you look back at that in my first year playing and, having time in and there, like I didn't play a lot. I think I played like 17 to 18 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And, back then it was more the old school game that you got to earn your respect to get on the court.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember having a game, had like 18 points. And then the next game I didn't even play. I was like, shoot, like, what is this? You got to earn yourself. And so it was that part of, constant working, you had to be in the weight room every single day. You had to do rookie duties. Like at that time we had Daryl Armstrong, Bo Outlaw. We had like old
heads.
like old heads. Like, all right, you better bring me some coffee in the morning. You better carry my bags. I need some Hershey Kiss. Like, all right, like all this stuff, that this newer generation never had to deal with.
Nope.
But when you think about the work ethic part, to earn their respect because of how hard you work and the things you're being obedient and being a professional which made me the player, I would say, going on to my career.
Mm. And that's a great story, and that's just great information or advice. It's just like you got to put in the work to gain people's respect. You got to earn it. It's not given. You got to earn it. So you stay in Orlando just one season, right? And
yes.
You traded to the Clippers. So you end up getting to California, even though you didn't go to Stanford, but you get there anyway. So, okay, now you about 2021 and you in La La Land. So talk about that experience a bit, transitioning, and with the talent, you get teamed up Was Eldon there at the time when you got traded at first?
No, he wasn't. He was there the following year.
Okay.
But
Okay.
during that time, like you said, you're going from 20, 21 years old. You're going to California, and at that time, my brother actually stopped going to college and ended up packed his bags up, and he went with me to California. I'm like, man, I don't even know what I would have did without my brother at the time. We see all the lights in California, like, oh, we hear all the sunshine.
A lot of
I
distraction.
remember
Yeah.
it's a lot of distraction. And I remember, and this is no disrespect to Inglewood or any area, right? I remember we're going online and we're looking like, man, where are we going to stay? And they had this new building called the Villa Azure at the time. Like, all right, they just refaced the entire building, right? So my brother is looking online. He's like, man, bro, this is a good spot right here. We can stay there. So I'm like, all right, we get our bags and we hop on a plane. We go to California, and we're like looking around, like, man, dude, are we in the hood? Where are we? And we end up staying in Inglewood at the Villa Azure. And so it was a difference. Like, I'm like, all right, well, you coming from Orlando,
right.
Well, you had this really, this huge place that you're probably paying, $2,800 a month, and all of a sudden you're paying $2,800 a month here. That's not going to get you the same amount. So even financially, it was totally different.
Right.
And man, it was like, thank God that my older brother was able to go to California. And then, you get there, and Alvin Gentry was a coach at the time. We had two, phenoms that was coming in, Darius Miles, Quentin Richardson, and then Keon Doolan gets traded there, and then Ellen Brand. So all of a sudden you have this young talent. And I tell you what, Fallon, we had the best battles in practice. Like,
bet you did.
We played so hard in practice. Like, it was blood. It was fighting. It was pushing. It was a competitor. So you had like 3 or 4 dudes that were from Chicago, right? And then you had some cats from New York. Then you had some California guys. So it was competitive every single day. And some of the time we didn't even get a chance to play, but our playing, our competitive nature was in practice. So we did that every day, which allowed us to finally get a chance to play. And, we started to kind of make a name for ourselves, even though we were still at the bottom of the barrel as far as from a win standpoint. We knew the importance of why we had to practice in order to gain minutes on the floor. So we're coming back, for me personally, I'm coming back from, AAU Nationals to winning in high school, to going to Duke and, winning the ACC, not losing the game in the ACC, losing the championship game, but we're still part of this winning culture, right? Then going to Orlando, where we were 41-41 that season. We were 5 on the team. We ended up losing to Milwaukee Bucks when they had Ray Allen and Sam Cassell and Tim Thomas, that they actually leapfrogged us to go to the playoffs. And then you go to the Clippers, where you win, 15 games, right? I'm like, it was a big culture shock from this standpoint.
Yeah, because it was like, you just named it. Y'all had so much talent. And I was like, every year, I used to love it. Q Richardson and Darius Miles, they be doing the little knock on the head. And it was just the energy you guys brought. It was fun to watch. It was a dunk fest. I'll be throwing hoops, running. But it was, like you said, you guys weren't turning it into wins. So what was, I know that playoff run you guys made, what was that 2007 maybe? I think right before you left the Clippers. Y'all had that run. Okay. And y'all made it to the playoffs for the first time in a while. And I just remember the energy. Y'all won the first playoff series, and y'all were on a roll. Y'all were fun to watch. I think y'all lost to Phoenix in a 7-game series. But talk about that, I guess, when you guys finally got to that point where you guys were able to turn it into more of a winning culture, knowing you had all this talent.
Well, the change started where they brought Mike Dunleavy at the time, and he tried to bring some type of discipline, I would say, culture. And then they added Sam Cassell, who's a veteran that won championships with the Houston Rockets. Then you bring in, Katino Mobley, who was a winner, played with Houston at the time. He was just one of those competitors that you want on a team. We brought another Vladimir Radmanovic, a 6'10" shooter. And that was the change, right? That was the change. So mind you, Elton and I coming off seasons before that year before that, we both averaging 20 points a game.
Right.
And I remember Sam Cassell coming there, and he called me when he got traded, when he signed with the Clippers at the time, called me and said, hey, we need to talk. You need to talk 5-0. I was like, all right, it's good to meet you, but we didn't really have a conversation. We need to talk. And he said, hey, listen, we got to know, where do you stand? I'm like, what do you mean, Sam? Like, listen, there was going to be some nights where you score 15, and there's going to be some nights that you score 21. And you have to be okay with that. Because in order for us to be a good team, we need to start from the inside out, which is starting with Elton, and then we go with you. And that's going to help. That's going to help us win games. And it was hard for, as a younger player, and every single year, I'm improving, statistically at a standpoint. And even for my own self, is becoming a better player. But here you go, Sam Cassell telling like, all right, you might have to drop, what you're doing in order for the betterment of the team. It was the best. It was the best thing that Sam could ever done. It's a reason why Sam Cassell is on the bench right now,
Right.
of having that leadership, because he knew what we needed at that time. And just so happened early in that year, I was leading the team in scores, like 23 a game. Elton was at 21 and 22. And then I got hurt against the Miami Heat and had this Liz Frank injury. So I was out. I was out until the last few games, I would believe, of the regular season. They brought a kid in at Quentin Ross, who was the defensive stopper at the time. And then all of a sudden, Elton Brand's game took off, because now you don't have this other guy that's scoring like you do, even though Sam was averaging 17 to 18 at that time, I believe. But you didn't have Corey, this slasher that's going to get to the foul line. So he elevated his game as a player. Coutinho elevated his game. Sam elevated his game. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting back, I'm injured, and I had a cast on my foot, and I had to watch. And so that entire time I had to watch. And I remember my first game coming back was against the Utah Jazz in Utah. And, still tried to figure myself out coming off the bench. And then I had to, figure like, man, I was a starter, and all of a sudden I got to come off the bench,
Right.
Because
What's
I
your role?
sat out.
Right.
Exactly. So for me, mentally, I had to figure out the role. And, you said it. Then we ended up going to the playoffs. We played the Denver Nuggets at the time, and it was an amazing series. We ended up beating them. And just so happens in that series where my role was still undefined because I'm still coming in from an injury, I end up leading our team in scoring off the bench, against the Denver Nuggets. And then later we end up losing to the Phoenix Suns, which was a tremendous, team that we played. Steve Nash was unbelievable. Sean Marion at that time. They had Tim Thomas, Stoudemire. They just had an unbelievable Rajah Bell, who was just a defensive, stopper and a three-point corner specialist. So they had a lot of pieces to the puzzle against Phoenix. I tell you, we should have won that series. Honestly, when we look back, Dunleavy probably made a couple of bad coaching decisions. And so, but also, I think as we understand this game, that as players, we made mistakes all the time. If it was a turnover here, if it was a lack of execution, but that's what it boils down to. When you have a lack of execution and you don't follow through with the plan, it can cost you a victory. And that's what happened in the last second, where Rajah Bell hit a shot over Daniel Ewing to win that game, and they went on to win that series.
Yeah, that was a tough one. I remember watching that one. I was like, I was rooting for y'all. I was hoping y'all were going to go to the next one. So then after that season, you're a free agent. You decide not to re-sign with the Clippers and move on to the Golden State Warriors. So you're still in California. And one of the reasons the Warriors wanted you was because of your work ethic, your leadership. You were averaging a 20-point score at the time. And, your knack was you knew how to create, get to the free throw line, and find ways to get points for your team. But I think it was that leadership as well. And the Warriors, they had a pretty young team, or they were transitioning to rebuild with a young team. And then a kid by the name of Stephen Curry joins the team. This is early in his days after Davidson, so he wasn't what he was today yet. But just talk about that a little bit. Like, did you see any of that when you're with Golden State and seeing how he's progressing, even going through injury, and were you a bit of a mentor for him since you had gone through some injuries yourself, and just explaining this
Yeah.
process as a pro and how you have to work and keep your body healthy and stay in shape and do the right things to stay healthy for the season?
Well, he was really committed, I would say. And honestly, if you can ask anyone on their team, no one ever expected Steph Curry to be where
Right.
he is today, and how, a three-time champion, a multiple-time MVP, a guy that, signed over $200 million, probably the greatest, one of the greatest contracts in the history of basketball. But what I did see back then was a guy that listened, really listened.
Mhm.
And you said it, that was one of the reasons why they paid me that amount of money in Golden State at the time, not only to bring scoring, they needed someone to get to the foul line, but they needed someone to bring the work ethic, in the weight room, on the court, the one that wanted to win every single drill, that was going to stay there later. And, that's one of the things that I would say I noticed early from Steph. He said, hey, Corey, you going to the weight room? All right, Steph, let's go. And every time I was personally in the weight room at the time, he made sure he was there. I was there early. Steph Curry was there. He was getting his shots up. And the other part about it, I would say, the transition for even Steph is our coach at the time, one of the winningest coaches in the history of basketball, Donnie Nelson.
Mm-hmm.
He did something that was very different, even in that We Believe team when they had Steven Jackson, Baron
Mm-hmm.
Davis, Matt Barnes, their group of guys, Monte Ellis, who was the most improved player of the year.
Right.
He did something different where he put everyone in uncomfortable situations. What I mean by that was, Steph came in the game sometimes as a point guard that he had to guard a three. And Steph was like, wait, hold on. Like, I got to guard a three? And then the same for me. When I'm coming in, I'm a 2 or 3 in the league. No, Corey, all right, guys, Corey, you're going to be our starting 4 this year. I'm like, what? Wait, Nelly, I'm a 2 or a 3. No, you're going to be our starting 4. And
Right.
so he put all of us in these uncompromising positions where he felt that it would make us tough. And when I think about it, it was the best thing that he could have ever done for Steph Curry, because now you had these guys that were trying to bully Steph early on in his career because he was small, he was scrawny, but he was a shooter. He was very, very skilled. What I mean by very, very skilled, this guy understands how to pass the ball with the right hand, left hand. Everyone see today the way he shoots the ball, all his other stuff. But Steph is an amazing passer and a guy that dribbles both hands equally. He can make plays equally. Like, if you need Steph to go out there, if he needs you to go out there and get 10 assists, he's going to go out there and get 10 assists a game. He's that type of player. He already had that early on in his career. And he just knew the game. He had a high basketball IQ, but just so happened during that time he was having injuries. He had the ankle problems. And I remember having a conversation with him, and he was really down, and he was going to physical therapy because after he had surgery. I'm like, Steph, man, you just got to keep fighting, man. He said, I've been there. I've been in that position, and you just got to keep fighting. And he just never gave up. And I tell you, man, everyone gave up on him. Every single person. I kid you not. Even at that time, the Golden State Warriors were going to trade him. They were going to trade Steph because they didn't know if he can actually stay healthy. I remember in the beginning, it was like a low, contract that he signed because they didn't believe that he can withstand without getting injured. And just so happened, man, I tell you, Steph came back with a vengeance. And I personally, to this day, I don't know what he did. I know that he had a God's grace on him. Just that he started playing, said, I'm not going to play for myself. I'm going to play for the man upstairs, and I'm going to let him guide me through this. And he took off. Kalina Azubuike, he was our teammate at the time. And now he's the play-by-play, the color analyst for the Warriors. And we say the same thing. Like, man, we never saw this. We never saw this happening. And so, when you think about that and how he made that transition on fighting through the adversity, when everyone else is counting you out, he decided to push forward. And, right now, look where he is today. He's one of the greatest shooters. Matter of fact, it's not one of them. He is the greatest shooter ever.
He's a generational talent. It's like, never seen. We've seen some greats, but just the way he's released and how he can just, he's on a tear right now, which is just amazing. But when you see that transition, he had his first 2 or 3 seasons in the NBA were tough for him. And then he finally broke through. you're right. He's very big in his faith, his belief in God, and he really preaches it.
Yeah.
And you're right. If you put it in God's hands, look what happens. Look what happens. So that's pretty spectacular. But turning back to you, so you're at Golden State for about what, 2 seasons, and then you get traded.
Yeah.
Okay, and then
Yeah.
you
Then I
get
get traded.
to the Bucks.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. So at the time, yeah. So I actually, that last season in Golden State, I'm actually running on the track, and then all of a sudden I tear my peroneal tendon, like just the weirdest thing to ever do. So I go to Milwaukee at that time and come in. Now I had surgery and I'm coming in late. And it was a tough season. I would say, as far as any season in my entire career, that was the toughest one, because you had a coach that, man, this guy was just a no nonsense Scott Skiles. You know, he was just this type of guy that walked like this every day,
He
every
didn't even
single day.
smile.
He just had
Hard no.
didn't even smile. And you know, and it was a challenging thing for me where, you know, you could talk to the coach and then he was like non-responsive, and it was rough. I mean, I tell you, that was the hardest season of my career, as far as physically, because I'm still trying to come back from an injury, and then mentally on trying to figure out how this coach wants us to play. And it was not just me, it was everyone, because before the season before, they had a really good season. They had Brandon Jennings at the time, you know, what's the kid that played at Golden State? I just forgot. Andrew Bogut. Like, he was a dominant force, and they went to the playoffs the year, but then Brandon Jennings had tore his Achilles. So it was like recovery, all this stuff. And it was just a different year for the Milwaukee Bucks. I would probably say that was probably, you know, if I had to pick the worst year out of my career, like the worst as far as, you know, everything and like dealing with injuries, that was probably the worst one. But also, it was one of the ones I would say, far as mentally tough, where now I can have these conversations, you know, with my son on how to handle this adversity.
Right.
When you have situations like that that doesn't fit what you actually think. But honestly, you know, to this day, you know, I'm so thankful for Scott Skiles at that time, and how hard and how tough he was, because it really built more character and perseverance in me as an individual on how to handle things off the court.
Right. So after Milwaukee, you were with the Bobcats for a little while. You're down there in Charlotte. And then you end your career in Detroit. So, you know, that's good for, you know, your wife, she's from Michigan. So that was good to be close to family, at least during this whole journey.
She loved it. You're right.
But then you decide to retire and, you know, just to hang up your sneakers. So talk about a little bit of how tough was that decision when you finally had to make it? You know, it had been grueling for you towards the end, like with injuries, having to continue to fight through to prep your body for an 82 game season. So talk about how tough that decision was for you.
Well, it was tough because you go to Detroit, where at the time Lawrence Frank was the coach at the time, and now he's the president of basketball operations with the Clippers. And I'm telling you, I didn't get along with Lawrence Frank. I mean, I felt like he wasn't trying to utilize me. It just wasn't a good situation. But also, we had some young talent there at the time, and I remember, you know, I wasn't even playing. Right. You know, I'm coming in, I'm supposed to play. And all of a sudden, you know, Lawrence Frank would ask me like, hey, you know, could you work out the young guys? And now, you know, I'm on the side, I'm not playing in the games, but also I had to hold that professionalism as a veteran. And plus I wanted to stay in shape because I'm still coming back from an injury. Right. So sometimes, like my last 3 years, it was more rehab than actually trying to work on your craft. So if you're doing that, you're going on decline. I don't care who you are. And so I would work out with guys every single day. You know, one of the players who's a all-star, former all-star, Chris Middleton. This was a guy that they didn't play in Detroit, right? I worked him out every single day, one-on-ones, every single day.
In Detroit.
That's how rare it is. Like, no one knew Chris Middleton. I'm telling, like, listen, this kid, man, he's going to give me some buckets down here at one-on-one, and we'd play every single day. Myself, Charlie Villanueva, Kim English, who's a head coach in college right at the time, and you just had to keep that level of professionalism. So you had this part of, Milwaukee, right, where it had to teach you to have mental toughness. And then it was actually even escalated even more
In
in
Detroit.
Detroit, where my family loved being there because their family was there. But
Mhm.
also for me, it was different because now I'm not getting the opportunity to play. I'm debating if I'm retired, if my body can hold up. And just so happens that, it didn't work out the way I wanted at the end. It really didn't. I was disappointed. I just felt like I was doing so much of rehab that I couldn't even lock into the game. So at that season after Detroit, I was like, hey, I'm retiring.
Mhm.
I'm retiring. But I remember after that, I had to have a conversation with Lawrence Frank because, I felt like it was important, like to know what he thought and to be on a better page. And I'm so thankful, like, for even Lawrence Frank then. And I have a great relationship with Lawrence Frank, man. This man, like, listen, even one of the toughest times in my life, this was a guy that was
Mhm.
calling me every single day, have a conversation when I would have never expected it. So for
Mhm.
him, the type of man that he is, man, listen, I give him all respect. But in the beginning, like, I felt like we was like, I was like Superman and he was like Lex Luthor, right? With the kryptonite. And so, but when you think about those different situations as far as
Yeah.
perseverance, it's amazing that you need to have those in your life in order to persevere. And so I remember leaving after a year. I said, hey, I was going to retire. And a good friend of mine is Tony Parker,
Mhm.
and he was like, hey, actually decided like, hey, we're going to buy into this team. So I actually bought into a team in Europe, in
Mhm.
Asheville at the time. And so now I'm, one of the owners of one of the team in Europe with Tony Parker. And we actually leave from California and I'm heading to France. And he was like, hey,
Uh-huh.
do you want to play? Like, do you want to still play? If so, San Antonio just lost in the finals. They're like, man, we're going to win it next year. He said, you know what? I'm going to call Pop right now, RC. And if you want to play, we're going to get you on the team. I'm like, man, I don't know, man. I think I'm like mentally checked out, honestly.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
while I'm in the car with Tony at the time, he gets Popovich on the phone. Like, Corey, here go Pop. I'm like, hey, Pop.
What?
And he's like, and he said, hey, Corey, like, I'm talking to Tony. Like, if you want to be here, I got to talk to Manu and Timmy, and I'm going to talk to
Mhm.
RC. And, and once I get the confirmation from them, because I want to make sure everyone's on the same page. And he said, hold on, I just got confirmation from all of them. They said, hey, Corey's a great guy, had great professionalism. We'd love to have him on the team. So if you really want to be on this team and work, you have to leave right now. So mind you, I'm in France. We're going to a gala,
Uh-huh.
for our team. And
Uh-huh.
I had to actually, once that was over, I left and got on the plane and headed straight to San Antonio. So I
Wow.
headed straight to San Antonio. And so I'm thinking like, all right, and honestly, this wasn't my agent that did this, right? My agent was Rob Palinka at the time. Like Rob
Uh-huh.
didn't even know about this. He was like,
Right.
well, we got to figure out what we're going to do for you. And this is how I actually got on with the San Antonio Spurs. So I
Wow.
go over there and I get to San Antonio and I'm already thinking like, man, I'm retired. I'm just going up there just to make everybody feel good. But I'm gonna play hard. And
Right.
I get there and I'm thinking like, all right, I'm going to practice tomorrow. Oh man, what I tell you, a wake up call. This is one of the best wake up calls that I think a lot of players need sometimes. You're
Mhm.
thinking that you're good, or you're thinking
Right.
like, all right,
You still got
you
it.
have this, you still got it, or this status. No,
Uh-huh.
San Antonio brought me in. They set me up in probably the worst hotel in San Antonio. I remember it was cockroaches crawling around everywhere. And they said, all right, you got to get up at 7 a.m. and you got to work out. And there's 25 other guys there. I'm like, wait, hold on. 25 other guys. I'm like, man, I used to be this, I used to be that. So I'm thinking now I'm looking at my own personal accolades and
Right.
not understanding like, hold on, now, Corey, listen, no, that's gone. You have to work. This is how you started to get into basketball anyway. You had to work for it. You had to battle. And I remember for that next week, they had workouts for 25 other individuals, and we had to play against them every single day. We had to get up early and do workout. And it was, one of the greatest things that I could say as far as humbling
Mhm.
experience for me. And it was to the point where for me, from a mindset standpoint, I was already thinking I was already checked out to the point now because of the culture in San Antonio, it changed my mindset and how I wanted to approach things. So I go from the first couple of days like, oh man, what am I doing? I thought I was retired, to like, oh man, now I'm in the mode where I have to really work for it. I have to go back to even when I was in high school and all this, how you played, and even with the Clippers, how to earn a spot, and to that point where the validation came from like a Tony Parker, a Tim Duncan, a Manu Ginobili. At that time, Kawhi was one of the guys on the team, and they're coming in and they're like, all right, Corey, listen, all right, you come run with us and we're going to play against them guys. And so now I'm like, wow, I'm on this team with San Antonio. And I remember after that 2 weeks of training, I'm leaving the gym like, all right, guys, thank you. All right, get on the bus and y'all go head home. So we're like, they're basically like sending people out on the bus, and I'm about to walk out on the bus and got my kicks on. All right, Corey, you go right over here. I'm like, all right, the bus is over this way. And come to find out, they take me, and then I'm doing a physical. I'm like, all right, you're about to sign with the team. And I'm like, really? So now I'm doing all the training camp. I'm playing the last game, and then the last game against the Denver Nuggets at that time. Nate Robinson, I'm driving to the basket, and the knee I had surgery on, the year before, he goes and he tries to steal the ball, but he kind of clipped my knee as I'm going up. And instantly, man, my knee was throbbing. I'm trying to run down the court, and Papa's like, hey, what are you doing? I'm like, man, my knee. Man, come on, go sit your old self down. Go sit exactly what he said. Go sit your old self down. We'll get ready for tomorrow. So I sit down at like my knee immediately swells up. Danny Green is on the team. He's like, yo, Corey, what's wrong with your knee? I'm like, oh, nothing's wrong. So I'm pulling up my knee brace, like acting like nothing's wrong. And I ended up going back to the training room, and they was like, man, you're out. I'm like, what? You're out. And that was actually the reason I told you that story, because that was the time where, I actually retired. I was sitting in the locker room. Everyone left out of the locker room. And I got my head down, and I'm literally crying. Like, man, this is it for me in basketball. And I said, man, I need to go tell Coach Popovich that, I can't do it. And it was the one time I could say that I felt like I gave up, because my body gave up on me at the time. My right knee, just after, 4 knee surgeries. And I go in there and talk to Coach Pop. And it was like, man, I went in there as a man and went to talk to him, tell him, hey, Coach, I don't know if I can do it. He's like, what do you mean? I said, I think something wrong with my knee, and, I'll probably be out. And so for me at that time, I'm thinking about like, all right, I've been doing rehab for the last 4 years, on an injury here and there. It just felt like it was time. And I remember Coach Pop was saying, all right, wish you the best. Are you sure? We could keep you on the team and you could rehab. I was like, by that time I was already done. Like, no, I just can't do that. And and I remember having a conversation with, Kawhi and Tim Duncan, one of the main guys. Tim was calling, like, hey, whatever you need, Manu, whatever you need, you're still part of the San Antonio family. And man, after that, I remember having surgery, and then they end up winning the championship that year. Like, like what a crazy scenario. They end up winning the
championship. They beat Miami, right? After they had just lost, they came back and got them.
Oh, man. So I would have got my ring that year, but man, yeah. So I still remember that to this day.
Yeah. Well, your body's going to tell you first. They say that all the time.
Yeah.
Your body will tell you. And that's a great, I'm glad you shared that story, but that was a hard decision that you had to make. I hate that you had to make it that way. Especially after training so hard, going through training camp, playing well, signing with the team, and then for something like that to happen. But I like how you brought it back full circle, Corey, about when you had to make the decision to talk to Coach K about going to the league and talking to him as a man face to face at 19, to coming back to the last year of your NBA career and having that conversation as a man with Coach Pop. Like, I just can't do it. That shows growth, maturity, and I just think full, evolution at just that point in your growth in your basketball career. So now you're retired, and then this big 3, the Ice Cube, starts in 2017, and you join the Team Power. You're on that team, on that roster, and you tear your Achilles tendon. Now, what made you want to go play in the big 3, first of all? And then after you tore your Achilles, we're going to go full circle. You have to rehab from a torn Achilles, and then you come back the next season, a year later, back to the Power, play after the torn Achilles, win MVP of the league, and win a championship. So, like, how much, I guess, man, I mean, that's coming back full circle. Like, what was that experience? What made you want to play in the Big Three? How did you overcome another devastating injury and then to have the fortitude to come back and still play? What did you have to prove? What was that about?
Well, you know what? I take it one step further, closer. Is that I actually right after that season, I was actually working for the NBA. I was working in the basketball operations. So at that time, I'm working with the NBA, and randomly, as I'm visiting a team for the NBA, I get a call from Ice Cube, like, "Hey, what's going on? This is Ice Cube." I'm like, Ice Cube, like Ice Cube, Ice Cube. Yeah. So I'm like, man, I don't know if there's Ice Cube. And so all of a sudden he called me FaceTime. I'm like, yo,
Okay.
this is really Ice Cube. And he's like, yo, man, I'm trying to see, I'm starting this league. Would you be interested? It's like a 3-on-3. You won't have to, you won't have to work as much. And your body will probably be all right. And would you be interested? I'm trying to call some the Duke guys. And no, I just called Grant, see if Grant wanted to do it and all this, right? And I was like, well, I'm not really sure, but I think about it.
Okay.
And so lo and behold, all of a sudden you start getting the buzz of the Big Three and all this. And I'm like, man, then all of a sudden I started to get this itch because I didn't have that itch for a while. I'm like, all right, basketball is over. And now I'm looking at basketball from a different lens, working in the basketball operation. So how everything came about when you go to the arena and all the people that are involved, and most NBA guys would never even know. And so for me, it was another humbling experience to see, like, man, did I take this for granted? All the people that sacrifice every single day in order for us to go out there and to produce on the court. And so it gave me a look to see, like, everything else, that how the NBA was initiated and how everything works. So that was amazing. You were able to learn, a lot of business acumen from the NBA, different courses here and there. So I felt like I wanted to know more about the game, and not just from the actual game, but the other part. And here it goes, Ice Cube again, calling. At that time, Roger Mason was involved
Okay.
with the Big Three. At the time, Roger Mason had a great relationship with Adam Silver at the time. And so he really had such a great relationship that they kept bugging me. I would say bugging me about it. I'm like, man, maybe I should. But then I got word that, hey, you can't work for the NBA and do the Big Three. So I remember calling Cube, like, hey, listen, Cube, I can't do it. I'm working for the NBA and they won't allow it. And I'm like, all right. And so at the time, the actual All-Star game was in New Orleans, and Roger Mason said, listen, man, I'm about to put in a call to Adam Silver and see if he would allow you to play. And I remember at the time, Adam Silver called me like, hey, you know what? I'm going to give you the green light. So he actually gave me the green light that I can actually go and play. I was like, all right. But where I am at that moment, some of the bosses like, hey, Corey, no, don't do it. Just focus on this. Don't worry about it. Just focus on this. All right. I don't want you to get hurt. This is what they told me. The lady, her name was Morgan Cato. And now she's one of the heads at the NBA for basketball operations. And she's, Corey, no, just, you don't need to do it. Just focus on this. This is your transition, And I'm like, all right, I'm going to try. So I'll go out and decide that I'm going to try to do in a Big Three. The first game is in Brooklyn at the time. So the last game of my actual NBA career with the Detroit Pistons was in Brooklyn. And now my first game of the Big Three is in Brooklyn. So now I'm like, all right, I'm actually thinking about then, like, man, I'm actually playing on the court that I didn't play in Detroit. And then I go on, first half, everything is fine. And make a shot fake at the time, past Bonzi Wells. I thought he tripped me, and I fall. When I tried to get up, I'm like, man, my foot is not moving. And so I end up hopping off of the court, and come to find out, I tore my Achilles. So now at that time, I'm devastated. I'm devastated. Like, man, I've had so many injuries, and for a guy that works his tail off in the weight room and do all the things you need to do, I'm injured again. And I wasn't sure. And I remember getting on my knees and just praying and asking God, like, hey, what kind of direction do you want me to go? You know, if you decide that you don't want to try or work out or try to go back to the big three, I'm not going to do it, because I'm like, I can't have a position where I'm quitting because of this injury, not to try it again.
Right.
And honestly, I started doing rehab. I was rehabbing just to rehab. I wasn't rehabbing to play in the big three. You know, Nancy Lieberman, who was the coach at the time and, you know, Hall of Famer, she said, you know, Corey, are you coming back? This is 3 weeks before the season. And I was like, 3 weeks? I kid you not. I'm like, you know, Nancy, I'm sorry. I don't think I can do it. You know what? Now I'm having problems with my right knee again. So this right knee that I basically had to retire from, it started to act up again. I had a couple years. It was actually, you know, it was like basically on ice, and it went back to normal. And I told him I'm not playing. And 2 weeks, I told him I'm not playing. 1 week, I said, and then so now I'm the captain of the team. Now I have to make a decision if I'm going to give up my captain spot and try to find someone else to take the position. And I'm like, Nancy, I don't know. One day before our first game at that time, and going into the second year, I decided to play. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna play. Like, I didn't know. I honestly didn't know until the last game. You can ask anybody on our team.
No, I remember
Tino Mobley.
She was like, yeah,
you know,
playing.
Yeah, and I couldn't even believe it. And I remember going out there my first game, and Brian Scalabrine takes the charge, and man, he bangs my right knee. I'm like, oh shoot, and this dude go take a charge, the first play of the game, and but it was a wake up call, and I just kept praying about it, and man, Fallon, I'm telling you, it was basically a supernatural experience that entire year, where you go and you play all these games, and then you get to the position where you win MVP, and I won MVP, not by like the coaches voting, right? It was the coaches and the players, that voted. So that was like even more of a validation, I would say, on what I did. And then the championship game was back in Brooklyn. So Brooklyn again, when I retired, last game of Detroit Pistons, Brooklyn again, where I actually tore my Achilles, and then Brooklyn again, fires the championship game. And, I actually, pulled my hamstring the game before, playing against Nate Robinson and Amari Stoudemire against Tri-State. So I'm like, man, I don't even know if I'm gonna be out. I don't even know if I'm gonna play, because I was out. Coutinho was the same way. Coutinho pulled his groin, so it was out. Then I'm calling at the time Kobe Bryant's, specialty guy. His name is Barnes Beto. And Barnes was actually at like a NASA camp, on the east side, and he ended up flying, that night before our game, to work on us in order so we could play. And I remember Barnes stayed the entire day trying to get our body together just for the game. And I was like, man, I don't know how we're gonna do. We had a little energy. We could move a little bit. And, as far as the adrenaline for the game, we were able to play. But before the game, I remember calling Kobe, and I was like, Kobe, man, like, listen, I pulled both my hamstrings. What can I do I'm telling you, what can I do on the court to be effective where I can move less, because I really can't. And he was like, hey, Corey, you have to get to the mid-post area, do a lot of shot fakes, a lot of ball fakes, just casually move. And when it's time for you to turn for your shot, to be ready to fire. And I did that every single play. And so you go from not being able to move, where I started to listen to that part, and I ended up scoring 27 that game. So you go from, tearing your Achilles the first year to winning captain of the year, winning most valuable player of the year, then winning most valuable players for the playoffs, and then winning the championship. So, I mean, what a remarkable story, I would say, a fairy tale story. I can actually hang up my shoes in peace and live on.
I know. I think that was like the vindication, but validation. I think you said it. You needed because it was really just injury prone or just injuries towards the end of your career that just really
Yeah.
put you on
Yeah.
the sideline. And then to have this type of opportunity, not want to do it, then decide to do it, and then, gosh,
Yeah.
just to flourish and just really just have a huge success. That's storybook. That's for the movies. That's where you see the
Yeah.
kid in the Disney movie shooting the last shot for the game winner. And, it's just a
Yeah.
spectacular story. But I just want you to talk about, like, since you've been retired, I know you've been doing great things in California or where you live, just in your community, and just really just reaching out to the kids or the underprivileged, you and your family. So talk about, you
Hmm.
started Maggette basketball. It's been kind of hit a little bit due to the pandemic, but prior to the pandemic, what are some of the things that you were doing with Maggette basketball in the community and training kids in basketball?
Well, I think far as with anybody that I would say in professional sports at any level, you want to give back to your community. Like I'm not in Chicago for years. I would say for 15 years straight, I did a camp in Chicago, and I
Mhm.
did a free camp every single year to give back to the community that actually helped me, to give back even to the Boys and Girls Club at the time that gave me that shot. And so I wanted to kind of bring that same avenue out to California. And honestly, it was because of Millie. It was because of, her sister Anna,
Mhm.
that kind of pushed me, at the time. And my other guy, Keon Doolin, because Keon was like, hey, and he's an assistant coach now for the Utah Jazz, which is the #1 team in the West. We decided that we wanted to start to do a little basketball thing and just kind of invest in some of the kids. At that time, it was called KC Basketball.
Mhm.
And we started KC Basketball, and we thinking like, all right, we're going to probably have like, 10 or 15 kids that show up. Man, it was like 300 kids that showed up. And
Mhm.
so like, whoa, what are we going to do here? And so we started to bring people around that we knew, like my brother at the time, this guy, Eric Hamasaki, that worked for the Clippers for 26 years. When he retired, he actually started working, and he's actually still part of our program. And we started to figure it out. And then you had Anna and then Millie, who actually took it to the next level.
Mhm.
And, Keon went from that part of working for the NBA Players Association. So he went from there. And so now I actually split up and did a whole different program, which was called Maggette Basketball. And we just really wanted to, Fallon, just to give the kids a chance, right?
Right.
To work on the game and to have someone, a professional athlete that played the game, to be involved, right? I wanted to give these kids whatever we had, from jerseys, to, making sure the parents are okay to come in. There's cookies, it's donuts, it's coffee,
Right.
it's just a different experience for the community. And
Mhm.
we felt like, even though you would say Orange County is privileged, there's a lot of kids that aren't, that can't pay for those different type of things. And we just kept trying to invest. We kept trying to invest, and it was the best thing for us. It was, to the point where, Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, he sent this long video for the campers,
That's
and how much he felt like we were doing, for the community in Orange County. Kobe Bryant at the time,
awesome.
who lived in Orange County, who invested in Orange County. It was actually like the start for him when he started to do the Mamba, because he would come to my camp and bring his daughter Gianna at the time to be involved and use the gym. And all of a sudden, Cole, like, hey, Cole, would you mind speaking to the kids?
Yeah.
And so, multiple times that, he came and invested and talked to our kids. So now, you have this program that basically just kind of came out of nowhere, and people started to kind of get on. And
Mhm.
Rob Pelinka at the time, who was the general manager of the Lakers, he was our agent, myself and Kobe at the time. And, because he lived in this community called the Port Streets in Newport, word of mouth, Rob started to talk to people. His wife, who was a doctor, started
Mhm.
to talk to all the kids around the family. Hey, you guys come and be involved in this program to help your kids. I know you want to play basketball. And that's kind of how it worked. And, we truly loved doing it, because it was also a chance, for my nieces and nephews, for my kids personally, to get, training, right? To
Right.
get people that are invested in the game, and to see all different walks of life that are coming in for one common goal. What was the common goal? Was to learn how to play basketball, to walk in integrity, to walk into character, to be a good teammate. And so that's what we wanted to use, I would say, far as, my platform, because we wanted to use far as our faith base, because we are lovers of Jesus Christ. We wanted to use that as to feature Maggette basketball. And so that just allowed us to really pour into this, to the city. Newport Christian School, what an amazing school that my son was actually going there. And they allowed us to use the gym, every single day, and to invest not only in the community, but to start to invest in their students that were at their school. We went from a grade school and it turned out to a high school, and we just started to get kids in there. And man, it was just an unbelievable experience. And right now, we're not doing it because of COVID, and we're waiting. We're waiting to come back. We want the parents. We want them to feel safe enough where they could bring their kids in, because I know these kids, they need it. I have family in Chicago, that, still, haven't been into school and haven't been able to go out and play sports because of the pandemic, and plus because of the temperature, because it's been cold. So, the luxury that we have here in California, we just wanted to do what we can to invest.
Oh, I love it. I love it, Corey. And, I've been a fan of it ever since you guys started Maggette basketball. The times I come visit and just seeing what you guys were doing, working with the kids and how the kids were engaged. And that's what I loved about it. It wasn't so much about the competitive nature, wins and losses. It was just about coming to get good training, and putting in the work and getting better. And the kids enjoyed it. It was fun to them. Y'all made it fun for these kids to learn the game of basketball. So I hope it gets going very soon, because the kids need it. I thought it was beautiful. So I like to end the podcast with the talk that talk questions. I call them the triple T cubes. So I ask you questions and you give me your response off the top of your head. So the first question, what advice would you give to young men who are aspiring to one day make the leap from college to the pros? What advice would you give to those guys?
I would say, to use your gifts and talents to the best of your ability, to value, to play with a sense of urgency, to push yourself. Like, I think a lot of kids today, not every single kid will make it to the NBA, but every single kid in either sport can work as hard as they can. And so if you work as hard as you can, you give yourself a chance. You're giving yourself a chance. And I was telling the same thing to my kid. Give yourself a chance. How can you give yourself a chance? Work hard. Put in the work if you want to achieve your goals.
Love that. All right. The next question. Over the span of your career and just, going back and thinking back with everything we just discussed, is there anything that you would change about your journey?
Anything that I would change?
Yeah.
I would say the one thing, because it took me a while to get there as far as schooling, is I would have personally stayed in school for all 4 years. If I can go back and look at that situation, because academics was really important to me. Just so happened something happened within that part that I was driven by the sport. But if it was one thing that I would change, that would have been the part, instead of waiting 10 plus years to continue to go into school.
Yeah.
That's
hard. That's what I
say.
Yeah, it gets hard. Yeah. Shoot, I don't never want to go back. But that's some good insight. And this is the last one. What is the legacy that you want to leave for future generations?
I would say, for future generations is probably to remember character and integrity. You can't talk enough about that. I think, if you walk in the spirit of excellence, if you walk in integrity and you walk in character, it's going to really lead you down the right way. I think a lot of times in this generation, we have a lack of integrity. We have a lack of a character. And so those are some of the things that, we need to get back to, as men. And I would say the leaders of the household is definitely the men, right? Is to be leaders for your kids, to walk in integrity, to walk in the character. And, if you do that, now you have your kids, the next generations will have a better path and to walk the way that they've been taught and the way that they should live.
I love it, Corey. This was excellent. Oh man, I am so happy you were able to join me tonight. I know we were going back and forth a little bit with scheduling. You're so busy,
Yeah.
but I'm so happy I was able to get you on the podcast. I've always had this in mind. I was just thinking of the right time to ask you to join me, but this was an excellent conversation, and I know that this is going to reach my viewers and listeners to really get some great insight. Kids that are really working hard to the understanding of how much work it takes, and just because you make it to the pros, you still have to work. And I think that's a lot with the generation today. It's some, but you just see a lot of young athletes that they just get there, reach that accomplishment, and they're good. And it's no more work put in to be great. And you were one of those last group of those, that older generation or our age that still really put in that work to be great, no matter how big you were in the NBA or not. It was always about the work and getting better. So I appreciate you for joining. And thank you so much. This is an excellent episode.
Hey, it's Fallon. It's one of the things that I would say to your point is that, a lot of kids today, they see, what the great players are doing on the basketball court, but they didn't see the hard work that those guys are staying late in the gym,
right,
to be the greatest shooter. Steph Curry and one guy that changed the game of his shooting, but you didn't see the hard work that he put in, the mid-range shots, the layup, the constant working on his ball handling. And a lot of kids today, they look at the highlights and think that's what happens. Like, all right, it's a process. If you want to be this guy that can make highlights, it's going to take constant hours of work. Don't just look at what you see. You got to understand that it is a body of work behind it.
Right. And that's a good point. I think Drew Holiday, he did an interview with, he was on someone's podcast. And he mentioned that, like, the kids wanted to be Steph Curry, and they think it's just he shoots these half-court shots. They think it's easy, and that's what they should be doing in games.
Yeah.
You don't understand the work he puts in order to hit those half-court shots and make it look easy. He's really put in the work, and you just explained that when you said you played with him. So that's a great point. Yeah. Great point. Well, again, thank you so much for
anytime.
Yes, anytime you want to join, we'd be happy to have you. I'll say,
well, Fallon, you part of the family anyway. When you come over here, you part of the family. So anytime you want me on, we can do it. Next time we're going to do it, you're going to be here at the house because when you come over, you're babysitting. So anytime.
All right. We'll do that, Corey. Thanks so much for joining me and staying up. Well, it's late my time, but I know it's early still in Cali. But I appreciate you joining the podcast. This was fun. And what an incredible story.
Anytime.
I love listening to it.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Talk to you soon, Corey. Oh, man. So what a great episode. Episode 23 of Talk That Talk. We had Corey Maggette on this episode, and he just had a great conversation with me. Felt like I was in California, just kicking it on the couch, talking and just having a conversation just about his journey as an amateur to a McDonald's All-American, to a collegiate athlete at Duke University, to a pro making it to the NBA, which is a lot of young kids and a big dream of a lot of young men around the country, but very few make it, and he's one of the few. But that was an excellent conversation. I hope my listeners and viewers get something from this conversation in this interview, because he really gave some gems to kids about the importance of working hard, being able to persevere when you have adversity, injuries, coaches not wanting to play you. Even if you are talented, it's just about life and the game of life. And just when you think you've made it, you make it to the pros, you still are going to have some hurdles that you're going to have to overcome. But it's all about integrity and your character and how you persevere to overcome it. And, Corey's very grounded in his faith. That's something I've always admired about him. And I think that's why he's been able to persevere. And even though he retired from the NBA and that may not have ended the way he wanted to, he got a second act in the Big Three, won a championship, and he was an MVP. And he was the captain, the league captain, won all of these awards and accolades in that league because coaches and players respected him and loved what he was doing. And we even heard some of the stuff he's doing in his own community to help kids to grow, learn, and get better. And that's all it's about. It's just paying it forward, giving back. So what a great interview with Corey Maggette. Glad I could have him on. But I'm going to continue the trend like I do every week. And I'm going to give the Black Business shout out. And this week, the Black Business shout out goes to Chastity Williams, a friend of mine that I met from a friend of mine from college, Jeremy Smith. But Chastity is in the A and she is cooking some fantastic meals. She's also an event planner, but she's doing some great things. If you go to her Instagram page, which is It's Red Potatoes, how I just said it is how it's spelled. She has some great videos where she's showing her meals, what she's prepping, from making salmon to making chicken dishes to making mac and cheese to making some broccoli, some vegetables, some collard greens, some green beans, you name it. It's some delicious soul food. I've eaten her food. It is amazing. You know, and what the young kids say, it's bussin'. Well, it is fabulous. It's delicious. You got to go try her out. She's working on getting her website together, but she's already booming in business, taking DMs, phone calls. If you want a meal, she has her prices on her Instagram page, or just DM her to get the information. But go follow this sister because she's doing great things in our community, and we always have to support our Black women or just Black entrepreneurs who are just doing great things. And Chastity's one of them. Again, you can follow her on Instagram at It's Red Potatoes, ITSREDPOTATOES. And go check her out. Again, DM her if you want to get some food from her. If you need some questions or need an event planner for any occasion, holla at her. She's doing it. She's doing big things. And that's the Black Business shout out for the week. Well, again, this was a great episode 23. I have enjoyed this. I hope you guys enjoy it. We're going to put this one out starting in May, but this was another great episode. Glad I could have CM Corey Maggette on this one. He gave us some great insight, great story about his journey. And you better check it out, better listen. This is a must listen, must watch. So stay tuned for the next one, but this is episode 23. See you next time.